Maybe some of you guys remember me talking about the trees that I really hate working on. And if you're in an area where you don't have to deal with palm trees, consider yourself lucky. Unfortunately, I get stuck doing them every once in a while. And of all the different varieties, different species of palm tree, the Canary Island date palm is my least favorite. I hate working on these things for so many reasons. They're dirty, they're dusty, you're choking on this stuff all the time. You've got to put on so much protective gear, and you're working with your mask on because the dust that comes out of these trees. And did I mention all the critters that live up here? There's spiders, big old ugly spiders that come out at you. There's rats that live in these trees. There's bats that live in these trees, and squirrels and birds, and God only knows what else is going to fly out at you as you're working up in here. But it seems like every time I get up into these date palms, I realize just how much I hate them. And here is the number one reason that I hate them. It is these spikes. These spikes are deadly. I had a guy a long time ago that worked for me, and he had one fall down and hit him on the wrist, and it went clean through. It missed his bone. It didn't puncture the skin on the other side, but a little bump came up from the other side. I had to take him to the hospital for that one. There's another interesting thing about this particular tree is it is really rotten. I know there's a lot of palm tree diseases, and I'm not quite sure if this is a diseased tree, but it sure feels like it. Because generally when I get up and do a date palm, I'm doing most of the work with a chainsaw. But here, I started off just tugging on all these lower fronds, and they just started ripping off. When I have a healthier tree, I'm able to sculpt a ball. It's a half-round ball on the top. But because all of these fronds are just coming apart, there's not a whole lot of support down here. Look at these spines, these spikes. You can just about break these off and hammer them into a piece of wood with a hammer. And they are about 6 to 8 inches long, and these butts are really heavy. And if you cut one and it flips over, you've got all these spines that'll come down and catch you anywhere. In this job, I got one in the calf and I got one in the hand, but it wasn't too bad. And this is what it looks like when I'm finished. Now, a lot of guys will trim even more so, but because this tree was so rotten, I didn't really have the ball to sculpt it to because it was just rotten stuff down there. So I left some of this fuzzy stuff down here just so that it looks a little bit more attractive. But all in all, this tree is really in trouble. I did end up shearing all the rotten stuff off the trunk. I finished cutting all this stuff off as well. I didn't show it in this video. But a lot of chainsaw work. I'm working at the church today, and there's a lot of memorial trees around. This tree right here is in memory of a young man who died at age 19, 45 years ago. It's a beech tree, and unfortunately, it's dying. Last year I cut a lot of the dead wood out, and it's dying all the way through. And quite sad. It's still alive, but it's reached a point where the people that planted this tree 45 years ago said they're ready to see it go away. So the young lad's name was Pascal. His father's name was Reinhardt. He's still here. He's quite old. I told him I'd save him a couple of pieces of the wood, and maybe he can turn a bowl or something in memory of Pascal. In the same token, there's a lot of other memorial trees in this church here. These 3 crepe myrtles were planted by some friends of ours. That deodar cedar over there, the big one, that's 30 years old. That was planted in memory of my wife and I lost a baby 30 years ago, full-term baby. Her name is Brianna. That tree over there is a memorial tree. There's a number of them inside the complex here too, inside the church grounds. I believe this little Magnolia solangiana is a memorial tree. So there's a lot of emotion tied up in these memorial trees, you know. So gotta be careful. Even a ugly old thing like this, you know, you can say, well, let's get rid of it, but it means something to somebody. So don't be too quick to make a decision based upon, you know, somebody else's tree. So we did a lot of work in this church this day. There was 3 of us on this job. The palm tree took me about 3 hours to do. The cleanup was horrible. But we also trimmed that deodar cedar over there. We trimmed this southern magnolia. We trimmed these 3 maton trees. Also, there was a small California pepper over on the outside that we did some pruning on. And finally, in the interior courtyard, there's this really magnificent Brazilian pepper. The Brazilian pepper is not one of my favorite trees because usually they're just a congested mess. But this tree has been worked on for a number of years, and it's actually open and it's not all tangled up like most of them. All right, today's job, we got a medium-sized California pepper with a magnificent trunk. And look at that thing. That thing is just amazing. We worked on this one earlier this year, and we had to do some major reduction up there because the base of this tree is completely rotten. I think I did a video on this earlier. And our situation here is kind of interesting. We got to rope everything down because we got some delicate stuff, but we were asked not to walk on the lawn. So everything up there has got to be roped down very carefully and brought in here, and we got to carry everything out this way. Another interesting thing about this job is this client had a redwood tree that they had to have removed by another company, and they asked the company if they could cut the trunk into slabs. So they did some freeform chainsaw slab work, which is quite embarrassing actually. I can't imagine why he would have even accepted this. I mean, look at this. That's every single slab that they cut was, I mean, thick on one end and 2 inches on that end, and that's probably the best of the bunch, and even that one's a mess. So part of my job now is to make firewood. You know, when we did this tree last year, a big part of our reasoning for reducing the weight was all of this decay at the base. And there's some more rot pockets up there, so there's a significant weakness in the trunk of this tree. So the only way of saving something that is potentially going to fall apart is sometimes to reduce the end weight and make the tree much, much lighter. And today I think we'll probably take off some of these water sprouts down here to keep it attractive. But interestingly, the client said to us when we got here, he said, you know, can you match this tree to the same height as the one we did before? And it became a matter of aesthetics from him. And I said, why do you want to do that? And his answer was, well, the tree is such a mess. So I had to carry on with a long discussion about, you know, topping the tree and cutting it back will ruin this beautiful tree. And if he just lets us do what we need to do to make this tree right. And finally he agreed. But it's interesting how a lot of people have got a perspective of a shape or, you know, a size of a tree, or, you know, they visualize a tree as being extremely dangerous because it's a taller tree. How you doing up there, Jorge?
Pretty good?
Good?
Yeah.
So I cut up most of those slabs into firewood. There was one presentable slab back here, so I went ahead and I recut it down to 4 inches. And I don't know, it makes a nice garden bench, I guess. He's still got a lot of wood here he's got to deal with, but I did put it into a much better state of affairs. Hopefully he'll appreciate this. Didn't ask me to do this, I just went ahead and did it. And this is what the tree looks like when it's all done. I went ahead and cleaned up the low suckers on this one. This one's turning into kind of a sucker monster. And while we're here, they asked us if we could clean up the dead stuff in this Tristania, which we didn't do a whole lot, but did amount to quite a bit of brush.